Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, SBC 205. Whatever time you're consuming this little artifact of academic media, once again, I am your SBC 205 public speaking instructor, Vic McInnes, coming to you live on tape from my COVID-19 compound here in the greater Grovetown, Georgia metro area, the Acantech Outpost in lovely Columbia County, Georgia. Hey, our lecture today is brought to you by cottage cheese. You know what's going to be really disappointing to you if you want to eat some cheese? Cottage cheese. Hey, today we're talking about persuasive speaking. We're down to the end of the class. We got 2 more weeks. Your persuasive speeches are coming up. That's kind of the culmination of everything we've done in the semester so far. So we really want to focus on this. What you're going to find with persuasive speaking, about 99% of what you learned so far applies to what we're going to be doing with your persuasive speeches. What we need to do, though, is just to focus and make sure everything is honed towards the specific purpose. We're going to be talking about organization. We're going to be talking about audience analysis. We're going to be talking about a whole bunch of things today that you've all heard before. We're just going to apply them in slightly different ways, okay? But the first thing we want to do is make sure we understand that persuasive speaking, and when we talk about persuasion, we want to differentiate 2 things. The first thing we want to define is coercion. Now, a lot of people will tell you that coercion is persuasion, where if I walk up to you and put a pistol to your head and say, give me all your money, and you give me your money, you have been persuaded, and that is absolutely not the case. Coercion is seeking to change someone's attitudes through threats or force, okay? Persuasion, on the other hand, is a legitimate effort to affect others' attitudes through providing the audience information so they can modify their behaviors and attitudes on their own, okay? Persuasion is a legitimate effort. We oftentimes sit there and we tell ourselves that, hey, people that are trying to persuade you are trying to get over, they're trying to, take advantage of you. When that is really not true, persuasion is a legitimate effort, okay? That's the first thing we want to establish. We've all been persuasive at some point in our lives, and we're going to talk about a ton of examples where you've used persuasive speaking without even really probably realizing it. One of the most obvious ones is when you tell your kids, don't do that or you're going to be grounded for the next 6 years. Okay, that's persuasion. That's not coercion. It is a threat, but it's not a threat of force, okay? So what we're going to be talking about is persuasion, a legitimate effort. The first thing we want to talk about is audience analysis. Now, audience analysis is the single key thing before you actually stand up to start speaking, okay? If you really want to know where you need to take your audience, if you want to see, if your job is to make sure your audience has this attitude, you have to understand the audience to begin with. You can't know how far you have to move the audience if you don't already know where they are. And whether or not there's 3 possible answers to where the audience is to your end state. They either agree with you in advance, they're neutral, or they disagree with you in advance. There are no other options. It's one of those 3 things. So if they agree, your job is to intensify their feelings. Okay? Focus on the positive outcomes. Focus on the good things about your point. You really don't need to convince these people. You're just there to intensify those feelings. Now, if they're neutral, there's only one of 2 possible reasons. The first one is they're uninformed. They don't know about what you're talking about. They've never heard that there's a problem, okay? And they just don't know. The second thing is they don't care, okay? If they're neutral, they either don't know about what it is you're talking about or they're not concerned about what you're talking about, okay? So if they're neutral, if through your audience analysis you understand that the audience is neutral, you have to work on both of those, okay? You can't work on the assumption that they're uninformed. You can't work on the assumption that they're unconcerned. You not only have to inform them, but you also have to make it relevant. We've talked about this before, about making it personal, giving it proximity. Okay? So you have to both inform them and make sure that what you're trying to persuade them on is relevant to them. Okay? If they disagree, you've got to change their minds. It's just that simple. If you're going to do their jobs and you know going in they disagree, you have to change their minds. Okay? It's a couple of, and this will depend almost entirely on your personal ethos. And remember, ethos was Socrates telling us the most effective way to persuade someone is through your personal credibility. Okay? Now, a lot of people will say, well, don't tell them that you disagree. Don't acknowledge you disagree. Listen, if you're up there and you're convincing them that they need to stop with the use of pesticides in the Savannah River watershed because it's killing the fish in Clarko Reservoir, and these are all a bunch of farmers, they are going to know in advance they disagree with you. There's not, not acknowledging that is going to make you look weak. All right? So a lot of people will tell you never, never, never talk about the fact that you disagree with, that you're initially in disagreement. I am of the exact opposite opinion, and there's a lot of studies that says if you walk in right off the bat and say, hey, listen, I understand we probably at this point disagree with this. The impression is that you're open-minded, you're confident, and you feel you're coming from a position of strength, which goes back to building your personal ethos. Okay? So audience analysis is the key thing you have to do before you give a persuasive speech. It's important for every other speech. You need to know your audience so you know what kind of evidence to use, what kind of language to use. We'll talk about language next week. But with a persuasive speech, knowing what your audience disposition before the speech even begins is incredibly key. Now, let's be honest. Persuasion isn't easy, okay? And there's a lot of ingrained sort of psychological tools that we use to get by on a day-to-day basis that keeps us from changing some of our ideas. And we're going to talk about those real quick. The first one we want to talk about is selective perception. Now, we are bombarded with stimuli all day long, and we can't observe and take in all of them. We're going to talk about listening, and when you talk about listening, it's an active process, and if you don't look to absorb those stimuli and bring them in, you're not going to be able to, you just can't take everything in, and what you take in, you actually choose. We now know that you actually choose it. We filter out a lot of data that doesn't agree with the way we're thinking, okay? So, I used to have a friend. She was from a very financially, socioeconomically well-off family. She was part of a group of friends that used to go to Baltimore Orioles games with us. Back when the Orioles weren't playing at the nice, wonderful, best park in baseball, Camden Yards. Excuse me, kill on the phone. Not when the Orioles were playing at Camden Yards, but rather when the Orioles were playing at really crappy old Memorial Stadium on the north end of town. To get to Camden Yards, okay, we had to drive through some of the worst neighborhoods in the United States because Baltimore back in the late 1980s was in the middle of a drug war. It was a really bad situation. The neighborhoods, the infrastructure within the neighborhoods was falling apart. And we would drive through those neighborhoods. And I remember one time I looked at her and said, wow, that's really depressing to see a great city like Baltimore with that much decay. And she looked at me and she said, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't see anything like that. It wasn't that she was a horrible person. It wasn't that she didn't see it. It's just that she chose not to perceive it. She chose not to look at it and remember it and process it and put it in her memory data. Okay? So selective perception, even though you think someone's being exposed to something, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to take that data in and process it. Now, similar to that is selective recall. Selective recall is something we all do, and these things are all things that we all do. Selective recall is sometimes when we perceive something, we filter it out after the fact when we don't like the results of the memories, and we change the memories, okay? Everybody who's been in any sort of an adult relationship boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, husband, wife, knows that, when you're in the middle of an argument, you will look at each other and you will both say, that's not the way I remember that event. We will change memories to fit our current existing belief structures. Okay? And in case you don't believe it, go back and look at anything that reflects nostalgia for the 1980s. Okay, the 1980s, I lived through the 1980s. I was an adult in the 1980s, was a cultural wasteland. The music was cute. It was not very good, but now everybody wants to talk about, how great the 80s were. Okay, well, at least people my age. Okay? Yeah, okay, boomer. Thank you very much. We'll move on with that. But selective recall is the entire basis for nostalgia, where we think that things were so great in the past because we've gotten rid of all the memories where those times really sucked a lot. Okay? I have had a very ugly encounter with an individual who was talking about how great the 50s were in Georgia and how wonderful it was to live in the 50s in Georgia and everything was great. And I just said, well, except for the lynchings. And I just, she was, okay? Because she had filtered all that negative stuff out. And it was just a wonderful golden age for her. She didn't want to recall any of those things, so she didn't. Okay? The next we're going to talk about is selective exposure. I just don't want to see it. I just don't want to. I had a professor, I was over at his house when I was in graduate school. President Reagan was president. And every time Ronald Reagan would come on the TV, he would turn the TV off. And I'm like going, Dr. Reeves, I've been noticing you doing this for a long time. Why do you turn the TV off when, President Reagan comes on and goes, that guy's got nothing to say I want to hear. And I'm like, well, maybe he would say something that would change your mind. Don't want to change my mind. Don't bother me with that. I know who Ronald Reagan is. I do not need to have any more information on him. That's selective exposure. Now, the other thing you're going to want to deal with is when you're going in, and this comes through audience analysis, is degree of commitment. There are, if you're going to the Ebenezer Foot Washing Baptist, Primitive Baptist Church, okay, and listen, I have a cousin who's a preacher at one of those churches. I love those churches. You clearly have your right to go to one of those churches. But those people are, and my cousin is a hardcore creationist. He believes the earth was created 6,000 years ago. He believes that man and dinosaurs walked on the earth at the same time, that the dinosaurs died off after the Great Flood. I love my cousin. He's a great guy. He did the eulogy at my mom's funeral. Love him. We just don't agree on that, okay? But if you were in the Smith Station Primitive Baptist Church and your job was to come and talk about evolution, you're going to have a hard time because those people's degree of commitment is so high, okay, that they can't change that belief, that single point, without completely destroying their entire belief structure. Okay? That is going to work against you to be in being persuasive. And then there's public commitment. And again, I have a couple of friends and a couple of relatives that were big Donald Trump supporters. And I have asked them, and now you can see that their support for Mr. Trump is waning. And I have asked them on multiple occasions, hey, listen, if you weren't such a big Donald Trump fan in 2016, would you bail on this guy right now? And they all give me really dirty looks when I ask them that. Because they made such a public commitment, they now feel like they have no wiggle room. And one or two of them have actually admitted it to me. He said, I've been such a big Trump fan that if I was to bail on him now, everybody would sit there, everybody I know would just tear me apart. Okay? So public commitment can be an obstacle to persuasion. But let's talk about how we're going to persuade people. Now I've given you the bad news. Let's go for the good news. Okay. First of all, let's talk about reasoning. And this is more for you to understand. Remember, one of my goals of this class was to make you good, critical consumers of public communication. This is going to help you, I think, more toward you as a consumer of persuasive rhetoric. Okay? So the first form of reasoning that we're going to talk about is inductive reasoning. And inductive reasoning means you make a broad generalization from very specific operations. Inductive reasoning is from the one to the many. Okay, got a little ahead of myself there. Okay. In a survey of 200 high school juniors in South Carolina, it was found that 110 failed a standard math test. Therefore, South Carolina high school juniors are lagging in math. Well, we can make that assumption. That's inductive reasoning. Okay, we take a small group or even one person within a group and then make a generalization about the entirety of the group as a whole. All right, it's the basic formula of every public opinion poll that's ever been done. We surveyed 1,500 Americans and we found that 62% of them don't like, 62% of Americans don't like potatoes. Okay, you can't really say you don't have that. That is a generalization based on data you have. Okay, but what if the surveyed population or the observed population doesn't represent the population as a whole? And we've all dealt with this before. Okay, that's a hasty generalization. Millennials don't like to work. Okay, that's not true. I actually believe that millennials are probably a lot harder working than boomers are, but let's not get into that right now. But because they saw one person that was 22 years old who was more interested in riding their skateboard around Aiken, downtown Aiken, they make the assumption that all 22-year-olds and all millennials are lazy. Okay? And that is obviously a hasty generalization, and a hasty generalization is a fallacy. Okay? There's reasoning by analogy. Perceived similarities between two individuals or two groups means that they are the same across the board. So if A and B are similar in characteristics 1, 2, and 3, we assume they're similar for characteristics 4, 5, and 6. Okay? Bob works at Groceries R Us. Bob steals from the storeroom. Therefore, we can assume that all people who work at Grocery R Us must steal as well. Okay? Now, that is false analogy. Clearly, that's flawed. That's a false analogy. But we run into analogies all the time. And we use analogies all the time. Okay? So, whenever we say, what's good for one high school population is good for another high school population. Well, that's not necessarily true for a whole bunch of different reasons. Okay? The next one we're going to talk about is the opposite of inductive. It's deductive reasoning. And deductive reasoning is a conclusion based on a broad generalization that someone is a member of a class, therefore all characteristics of the class must hold to them. The basic form of deductive reasoning is a syllogism. Plato laid it out about 2,500 years ago. All right. Oh, no, that's not it. All right, thought I had it. God. There we go. Okay, now we're going to back up one. All right, let's see if we can back up one. We can't back up one. Fine, I'll leave it there. I'm not going through that again. All right, the basic syllogism is this. Socrates is a man. All men are mortal. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. If we have a generalized class and this entity or individual is a member of that class, we can make generalizations about it. We can infer ideas about the specific members of the class from the general characteristics of the class as a whole. Okay? We're seeing that a lot now where people are saying, and I just saw it on the TV just a second ago. People are talking a lot this week about sending kids back to school in a month. How are we going to do that? Well, we've seen how they've done it in Germany, Switzerland, Sweden, Finland, and France, and the United Kingdom. Okay? We're a nation, so we should be able to do it exactly like they do. Well, the only problem is number one, we're really big. And all of those models aren't going to apply, so you do have some flaws with deductive reasoning. Okay? Let's talk about some other real quick fallacies. First of all, there's appealing to a false authority. I do not believe Kim Kardashian knows a damn thing about nutrition. Okay? And yet she sells herbal supplements. And she sells an herbal supplement after the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, came out and said if you took it, it would be hazardous to your health. I do not believe my old friend Channing Tatum, and yes, I've met Channing Tatum. We'll get it. We don't need to talk about that now. I don't believe Channing Tatum, who is a nice guy, really nice guy, at least the 5 minutes I spent with him. I don't believe that he knows a thing about ocean biodiversity, except for the fact that he may own a mansion in Malibu that overlooks the ocean. And yet, we put him in front of Congress to testify on oceanic biodiversity. Okay? Are these people experts? No, they're not. Why is it that we trust a former retired NBA player or a retired NFL player to sell us a car? Do they know anything about cars? No, but they're famous people. Okay? That is appealing to a false authority. There's also the argument ad hominem. And guess where you see this all the time? That's right, on Facebook. Okay? Where you're involved in a conversation with a person and suddenly he just goes, you know what? You're an idiot. All right, I don't have to listen to you because you're stupid. I don't have to listen to you because I looked at your profile and you live in Georgia. I don't have to listen to you because you teach at a technical college, okay? An attack on the person, an argument ad hominem, is a fallacy. And it even extends to a famous, I would not name the individual. He was a member of the United States Senate forever. He's from South Carolina. There's a lake named after him and a high school. And when a woman who was a PhD came in and testified against what this unnamed senator believed, he referred to her in the congressional record as a bubble-headed blonde and said, we can't listen to a bubble-headed blonde. Clearly, that's a horrendous thing to say, and it's an attack on the person. It has nothing to do with the logic of their arguments. And the last is an appeal to tradition. And, you know, in this part of the world, we hear this more than ever. We do it this way because we've always done it this way. Well, what if we've always been wrong? Okay? So when you hear somebody argue persuasively that, hey, you can't listen to that guy because, you know, he's from Barnwell County. And after all, we've always done it this way. And guess what? I blanked. I was doing really well, and then I blanked. Yeah. And, you know, LeBron likes this idea too. You know, I don't know, it's probably maybe LeBron Jones, for all I know. Okay? But if people do those things and they're trying to be persuasive, call them on it. Call them on it. Okay. So let's talk about how you can build your case and be persuasive. First of all, use evidence and reason. That makes sense. Okay? I've got a monster job email, okay? Second thing we can do is a foot in the door. The foot in the door is where you get a approval for a small request, and then you build on it and you try to make that, use that later on, okay? Get approval for a small request first. The first request should commit the person to additional support later on. Yes, I'd like to thank the Aiken County School Board for allowing me to speak today. We are going to need $60,000 to improve the air conditioning systems at Midland Valley High School. The air conditioning systems there have not been upgraded since 1983. $60,000 should get us through that. Spend the $60,000. 2 months later. I'd like to thank the school board for bringing me back. I'd just like for you to know that Strom Thurmond High School also has a need for an upgraded air conditioning system. We will need another $70,000 for that. They give you that a month later. North Augusta is going to need, okay, and you just keep coming back. If you come in and say, hey, listen, I need $1.2 million, they're going to say no. But if you get them to commit to $60,000, and then the other high schools are all going to go, but you fixed North Augusta's, how come you're not doing Aiken? Okay? That's called foot in the door. The other idea is door in the face. And a lot of you will say, I've never heard of door in the face. But I guarantee you, if you were ever a teenager and had parents that cared at all, you've used door in the face. Door in the face is where you ask for something you know you're not going to get and you probably don't even need, but it allows you to back off of that and act like you're willing to negotiate. I need $5 million to fix all the air conditioners at all the high schools in Aiken County. I can't get $5 million. Here, well, why don't you give me $150,000 so we can start, and then we can get 2 or 3 high schools done. Okay? How do you use door in the face? You former teenagers and teenagers out there. Hey, mom, dad, Becky's going to have a party at her house. It's really going to be a great party. Probably going to be over about 1:30, 2 o'clock. I know that my curfew is at 11, but if I could just stay out till 1:30, let's say 2, that'd be great. Okay? Your parents are going to say, are you stupid? No, I'm not letting you stay out till 2 o'clock. So what do you immediately do? Well, could I stay out till 12:30? Because that seems like being reasonable, 12:30. What about 12? Can I stay out an extra hour? And they may give you 12. If you had gone in initially and asked for 12, and 12 was really all you wanted anyway. Okay? That's the exact opposite of foot in the door where you ask for a little bit and keep asking for more and more. Hey, mom, dad, Becky's having a party. I know my curfew's at 11. Can I stay out till 11:15? At 11:15, it's only 15 minutes. And then you come back the next day. Hey, I heard that we're going to be watching a movie that's not going to end until 11:15. So 11:30? 11:30, okay? Okay. 11, you deny the thing. Hey, we started the movie late. It's not going to be over till 11:45. How's 12? Okay? Foot in the door where you ask for a little bit and then planning on coming back and asking for more and more. Door in the face. You ask for something you probably don't need and definitely won't get so that you can show you're willing to negotiate. The next one is pretty obvious, although it works its way in some really weird areas. Show your proposal is consistent with existing attitudes. There's a lot that I'm going to shy away from because people will use religion to sell everything. So let's not go with that right now. But I used to work for a veterans nonprofit here in the CSRA. And my job was to screen, one of my jobs was to screen a lot of proposals where people wanted to put our logo from our organization onto their proposals because they were veterans friendly. And so generally what they would do is they would send us these things and they would say, we'd like to say that you guys endorse our plan because we're veterans friendly. Because building a new industrial park is not necessarily anything anybody is going to approve of right off the bat because it's going to, more traffic, more infrastructure, a whole bunch of other things. Well, I got this thing the company had submitted for a permit to build an industrial park and had been turned down because the county thought that it wasn't necessarily in line with their overall development goals. It was legit, and I read it all, and it sounded really okay. So after getting turned down, the company came to us in my organization and said, hey, listen, we'd like for you to be able to use your logo because we're veterans friendly. And so the letter wound up on my desk, so I called him, I set up an appointment, I drove over, I sat down with him, and I said, so how are you guys veterans friendly? Well, we really want to show that we love veterans just like everybody else in the CSRA loves veterans. Everybody in this county loves veterans. And we want to demonstrate that we love veterans, and this industrial park will love veterans. And I'm like going, that didn't answer my question. How are you going to show the love for veterans? And ultimately, after about 15 minutes of going around and around, they said, well, veterans can apply for jobs here. And then they offered us a check, and fortunately, we turned that down. But they were trying to show their proposal was consistent with existing attitudes, okay? Every time you hear this, a politician will say, hey, listen, we all want to solve crime. Well, yeah, everybody wants crime to be lowered. No crime would be the best, okay? And politicians, we all want to make sure our children get educated. Well, yeah, everybody wants our children educated, okay? There's also appealing to an alternative value premise. One of the things that happened during the Obama administration was they wanted to get a whole bunch of tax benefits for companies that were engaged in alternative energy sources, like solar, like wind, like biomass, where you turn garbage into fuel. And they got nowhere with it. The Republicans in the legislature just did not want to have anything to do with it. because they were appealing to them based on global warming, and they just said, well, we don't think it's worth the tax incentives and the money. And it was going nowhere until somebody, either in the Obama administration or one of the Democrats in the Congress, said, hey, listen, let's not sell it as a global warming bill. Let's sell it as a jobs bill. If we do this, if we build these industries in the United States, we will be the world leader, and the world will be coming to us to buy this stuff. So they sold this alternative energy bill as a jobs bill. Okay, it's not going to say, who cares if it stops global warming? Nobody really, that's not our issue. It'll bring more jobs to the United States. And it passed easily once they made it a jobs bill. Okay, so appeal to an alternative value premise. Okay, now I'm going to go over two, okay, and you have to be very careful about both of these because they're a slippery slope. The first is going to be offer a reward, okay, and the most obvious way to offer a reward is, hey, Johnny, if you get straight A's, well, I got $5 when I got straight A's, and I thought that was great. $5, for you, all I know, guys, kids now are getting 100. But if you start giving little Johnny $20 whenever he gets A's and B's, okay, what's going to be his incentive to get A's and B's next year? Hey, he's going to want 35, okay? If you give little Johnny $5 for cleaning his room, what if you don't have $5 to give him anymore? Is he still going to do it? Are you still motivating little Johnny to get his chores done? Okay. Eventually, people are going to start, and when you use that on a larger scale, hey, listen, if you run constantly and repeatedly as a politician on the idea of cutting taxes, which is just an offhand way of saying, yeah, you'll have more money if you elect me, pretty soon people are going to keep wanting you to cut taxes. Here's the biggest way that this ever happened. Back in the 1970s, Dodge Motors offered the first rebate ever. You come to us, you buy a car, we'll give you $500. Okay, we'll either give it to you in cash or we'll take it off the price of your car. Okay, it's a great idea. Drove business in. Pretty soon, Chevy, Ford, Toyota, back then, Datsun, all went for the same thing. Okay, then what they began to realize was that people weren't buying their cars unless there was a rebate. And people were just sitting around going like, well, they were giving away $1,000 last year. I'll wait to buy a new car. So what they had done, they had caught themselves in a perpetual loop of having to offer rebates and rewards to buy their cars, or people weren't going to buy them. Okay? And the next thing is really kind of something I really, really advise you to stay away from is to arouse fear. Here's the problem with arousing fear is sooner or later, you're going to push people to an edge where you've moved to coercion. Okay, and it doesn't have to be directly coercion. If we want to talk about one of the big issues over the last couple of years, and I'm not picking on any particular politician, because the politician I'm thinking of that does this is not the one you probably think I am. There was a politician who ultimately started off running on an anti-immigration platform. He talked about anti-immigration. He was all about anti-immigrants. And it became to the point where he started with just saying, they're taking our jobs. Okay, and you should fear for your jobs. And that was something he said over and over again. You should fear for his jobs. And then he started with, and they're going to be criminal, and they're criminals, and crime goes up when immigration goes up, which, by the way, is not true. Okay, but he was saying over and over again, when crime goes up, when immigration goes up, crime goes up. And then he had to ratchet that fear up even higher, and that was all because that was all he had. And it ultimately got to the point where this individual, who was a state level politician in a state, he was running for a statewide office, was saying things like, "If we don't close the borders, you're going to be murdered in your bedrooms." Okay, and soon what they began to see within his state was an increase in violence against immigrants. So when you arouse fear, eventually one or two things are going to happen. Number one, you're moving to coercion. And if you go all the way back to that very first slide, coercion is not a legitimate form of persuasion. And number two, sooner or later, people are going to act on it. Okay. And I grew up in Alabama in the 60s, where our governor was whipping up the population all the time saying these people are going to come and kill your children. And eventually people started taking action on that. And the speaker, the governor, was accountable for some of that. So please be very careful. Okay, so let's talk about some other issues. Should you be explicitly persuasive? I don't know. That is with all public speaking questions. Maybe, depends. Okay, being explicitly persuasive is honest, at least. I would never tell people that you're not trying to be persuasive. Okay. What about organizations? Now, organization is just like every other organization. Informative, problem solution, all of that works. Okay. Chronologically develop it, spatially develop it. All of those development techniques that we talked about earlier works, okay, for a persuasive speech. Now, we are going to talk about, okay, what's called the motivated sequence. The motivated sequence was developed by a guy named Alan H. Monroe at Purdue University, okay? And the motivated sequence has 5 parts. There is attention, establishing the need, satisfaction, visualization, and action. Now, usually when we're in the classroom, I ask if anybody's ever seen Alan Monroe's motivated sequence before. And Alan Monroe got rich off of this. I love it when a guy that works in the liberal arts gets rich, okay? Because he sold this to a lot of people. And whenever I ask, have you seen the motivated sequence, I usually get 1 or 2 people to raise their hands. And I say, what were you selling? And in every instance, they come back with something they were selling. Gym memberships, cell phones, cars, insurance, okay? This is used to sell people. It's taught in sales courses, okay? Let me tell you how it works. You drive up to your car dealership in your 2013 Toyota Prius, okay? You want to trade it in, you have some kids, time to get a bigger car, time to move up to maybe a minivan, so you roll into the car dealership. And the first thing that's going to happen is some guy, and we now know this is true, that looks incredibly demographics, about like you, roughly your age, probably your gender, maybe your race, okay? Going to walk out and say, hey, I'm Bob. I work here. I'm a salesman here. What's your name? Okay? And he's going to reach out and he's going to shake your hand and he's going to make eye contact with you. He's going to bond right there. He's going to get your attention right off the bat. And he's going to look at you and say, how can I help you today, Mr. Smith? And you're going to say, well, I'm looking for a new car. And he's going to go, well, what kind of car are you driving now? And you say, my 2013 Toyota Prius. And then I guarantee you, he's going to make this sound. That is a sound that all humans understand is pain. Okay? He's going to go, wow, yeah, it's probably the right time to get rid of that Prius because it's what, 6, 7 years old? That's when those things start to get expensive. You're going to have to replace all the batteries in that thing, right? In the next year. And that's really going to cost you a lot. You really need to trade that car in, okay? He's established the need. And then he's going to say, what kind of car are you looking for? You go, well, I got a couple of kids. I'm looking to move up maybe to a minivan. Then he's going to go, we have got the cars that you need and we'll take care of all your needs, okay? Satisfaction. Come on over. Let's look at our family Vanagons. And he's going to take you over to not the least expensive. He's going to take you to one with all the bells and whistles. You're going to look at the price tag. And you're going to say, that's a little bit more than I was willing to pay. Well, let's just look at this model, and then we can look at some other ones later on if you like it. So the first thing he's going to get you to do is he's not going to walk you around. First thing he's going to get you to do is get you inside the car. Okay, and he's going to roll down the window for you, and he's going to close the door, and he's going to lean in through the window to talk to you to point stuff out because he wants you to visualize yourself driving that car. Okay, and he's going to point some stuff out, and he's going to talk about, and he's going to ask you a lot of yes questions. That's good looking radio, isn't it? Don't you see how the ergonomic layout of the dashboard is? That would help you on long drives, wouldn't it? Feel that steering wheel. It's very comfortable to hold on to, isn't it? Okay? So he's going to visualize for you. And then once you get to that point, he's going to go, why don't I go get the keys to take a test drive? And he is gone. Okay? And he's coming back, and you are locked into the ultimate visualization, the test drive. Now, I bought a car called a Suzuki Samurai once. It was a fun car. I loved it. It was a great car. It had a 1.3 liter engine in it. I could get to 0 to 60 in about 2 days. Okay? I knew that. I had driven one before, but I really killed the salesman by trying to take this thing onto the interstate. He did not want me to see the acceleration on this car. But usually when you visualize, he'll take you through residential streets, he'll take you on an uncrowded highway, the best possible driving conditions. And then he's going to bring you back to the dealership where you've visualized yourself in this brand new car, trading in your old crappy Prius. And then he's going to look at you and say, what's it going to take to get you in this car today? Okay? And if you go, I'm not really ready to buy a car today, he then begins to drop back through this process. Okay? Mr. Smith, you know that Prius is not going to last that long. You know it's about to get expensive. He has dropped back to need. He can go, okay, what about this car doesn't meet your needs? I think it's everything we discussed. He's back in satisfaction. Hey, why don't we take another one for a test drive? Maybe you just didn't like this one. He's redoing visualization. Okay? And they will go with that until you just go, hey, bud, I'm leaving. Okay? Now, this is the basis. The motivated sequence is the basis for almost every sales job there is these days. Okay? They teach this over and over. GM paid Monroe a ton of money. And everybody, and he did seminars for a long time. Like I said, well, a guy with a liberal arts degree gets rich off something he did in school. I am all for it. Okay? So that's the motivated sequence. All right. Let's talk about how you're going to end it. Okay? And there are very, very few things in this course where I tell you, you have to do this now. Your attention device has to be at the beginning. Okay? The call to action is the last thing you say in a persuasive speech. A lot of instructors will say it goes near the end and then you come back with an emotional payoff. Don't do that, because all they're going to do is they're going to remember the emotional payoff. You need to get the audience to do something so that they're committed and engaged with whatever your persuasive intent is. You have to give them a physical action to do, somewhere to go, some petition to sign. A lot of times when it's a political thing, they'll have you, hey, we'd like to have you sign this petition as you leave. And they won't force you to sign it to leave, but they're certainly going to implicate you. You know, they're going to try really hard to get you to sign it, because once your name goes on the line, you've committed to the organization and the ideas. Okay? So you need to have a committed call to action at the end. Now, the biggest failing in persuasive speeches in my classes is your call to action is, so now you know more about this, you will be able to. No, stop there. Okay? You need to give us a concrete action in real time and real space that we can go out and do. We can't do this anymore, do not do this topic, because I heard it too much, and it always is very difficult. But if you're talking about adopting a dog instead of buying a dog, okay, you need to tell us that your call to action. So now that you're ready to adopt a dog, you need to go to the ASPCA shelter here in Aiken County, which is located at and is open from Saturday from 9 to 5. And I will give you the number after we break, okay? You need to give them something to do, okay? This call to action is the last thing the audience hears. 3 characteristics of the call to action. Number 1, it has to be simple. Sign this. Go to this website, okay? Buy this product the next time you're at the store. Very simple. Number 2, it has to be specific. I want you to do stuff. No, very specific. Again, simple, specific. Sign this, buy this, go look at our website. Okay, simple and specific, and then it needs to be symbolic. It needs to show that they're engaging in a larger process. They're engaging in a larger action. Okay, signing a petition is the biggest way to do it. Every time I've been to, now that I'm no longer a civil servant, I get to engage in politics. There's this thing called the Hatch Act, which says federal employees can't campaign. I've been involved in some, since I retired 5 years ago, I've been involved in a couple of campaigns. And what I've always noticed is the first thing they want you to do is they want you to give them your email address. Okay? There's two reasons for that. Number one, our email addresses are kind of personal. We don't hand those out at random. Okay? Or we shouldn't anyway. So when they get you to give them your email address, you are symbolically committing to future communications with that organization. Okay? Give us your email as you leave so we can be in touch. Your email and your phone number so they can send you text messages. That's simple, it's specific, and it's symbolic. You get all three of those, you get bonus points. Okay. That is it for persuasive speaking. All right? Main thing you need to remember is everything about a persuasive speech, no matter what the topic is, everything about that speech has to be pointing toward the persuasive intent. All right? Your statement of purpose should lay out your persuasive intent. Not just get up there and say, today I'm going to tell you about the fish populations in Clark Hill Reservoir. Today I'm going to tell you why we have to stop using fertilizers to protect the fish population in Clark Hill Reservoir. Okay? Again, do you need to say, today I'm going to persuade you? No, but there's nothing wrong with doing that. Okay? So we will leave it at that. This went on probably a little longer than I wanted it to. Questions, email me. This will be your last speech. I put the times of this when the speeches are going to be due out on the web in an announcement yesterday. So I will post this on Monday the 13th, and we will be good to go from here. Email me if you have any questions, and otherwise we'll see you soon.